Hey, welcome to Demix. So, in this video, we are going to learn about writing unit test cases for service layer, for the success cases, and the failure cases. And also, we can cover for writing the other microservices like other REST APIs we are calling from our service layer or inside the business logic. So, let's get started. So, if you see in the last video, we have created and imported the project into our IDE. So, I have added some code, like some simple code I have added here. So, for example, if you see in the controller, I have added create API, then fetch API, then update, then delete API. So, those things I have added, and so for some other microservices also, like this API will be called some other REST endpoints. So, for example, in a controller, we have this API is there. From Postman, we are going to hit this one and the data will be safe. Now let's get understand the business logic. So whenever this business logic will be execute, first of all, it will be check the input data, the first name, email, and phone number. Either based on these attributes, we are going to consider in the database the data is present or not. If the data is already present, so we can throw an exception like student details already present. So it won't be an duplicate data as we already discussed in our part 1, like in use case. Then if this data is not present, then it will be go ahead and save the data into our database and return the response. Correct. So now let's run this application and hit this API, either it is saving the data or not. Let's run it. Okay, the application is started. Let's open the Postman. Okay, let's go to the body. Okay, I have prepared the request also. Let me go to the request what we have the student detail. So if you see first name, middle name, last name, age, email, phone number, those things are there. So let's go ahead and pass. If you see here, Dev, first name Dev, last name is Mix, age 18, email demix@gmail.com, phone number, something like that. Okay, now let's hit this one. So if you see, response is 201, it is created, and the response also it is came, right? So now if we are going to hit again the same API, so it will be identified from the database def mix and that email and phone number, whatever we are consider. If you see here, first name, email, and phone number. Let's see what response is getting. If you see student details already present, right? So this data won't be, for example, if I can give dev underscore 1, now it will be store, right? Now let's check the database also. So I'm using PostgreSQL database. This is dbeaver client to connect to the PostgreSQL database. Don't be confused. Now let's run this query. If you see there is two row it is created, right? There is two ID, age, name, first name, last name, middle name, phone number, right? ID is different, first name is different. Okay, let's edit this one for now. Okay. Now let's go ahead and write the test cases for this method actually. Correct. This service logic we can consider and we are going to write the test cases for this one. Let's go to our, if you see here, src main and test, src main java, test java under this one. So how this packaging structure is considered in our test also, we are going to consider the same packaging structure. That will be a standard actually. Okay, let's create service IMPL. Let me right click, new package service.impl. Okay. Now follow some naming convention in the test class. News, Java class, service impl, test. Okay. This is the test class. Okay. If you remember from the part 1, we have discussed about JUnit 4 and JUnit 5. If we are using JUnit 5, we can use at that extend with Mockito extension, Mockito extension dot class. So this class will be annotated as a extend with Mockito extension. So the Mockito will be understand this will be a test class. Now, what is our target class? Service IMPL, right? Now, if you remember at that inject mock, this is our target class. So we'll be annotated with inject mock, student service IMPL, student service, right? Now, if you see in student service IMPL, we have a method called register student. Let's call this method. Let's do this way. Right click, split to right. Okay. Now let's close this one to better understand. Now we have a register student method. So public void test register student. So always the test methods return type is void, and we have to mark as a at the test annotation so that JUnit will be Mockito will be understand this will be a part of the execution, test execution, right? Now student service dot register student. What is the parameter needed for this one? Student. Where is the problem here? Okay. Student detail, student detail, new student detail, right? Then whatever the parameters, student detail dot set age 18. Okay. Let's add all our constructor is there. Okay. All our constructor is there. Okay. New student detail of what is the constructor first name? For example, def def empty, then coming to last name mix, then coming to age 18, then coming to email dev mix at com. Okay, cool. And then what else is there? Age, email, phone number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Okay. Now let's remove this one. Ask this one. You can use setter getters also. That is okay, not a problem. So what is the return type for this one? Student entity it is returning. Student entity response equal to. Let's import this one. Right now, if you see here inside this, it is calling to the student repo object. Let's debug this one to better understand. Debug. Oh, sorry, here it is missing. Okay, debug this one. So we'll get to know what will the student repo object here. Function 9. Okay, see if you see here student repo is a null object. So null dot find by this method is nothing but null pointer exception will be throw here. So we will be injected, but we are not mocked this student repo object, right? But we are using. Let's do that mock. At that mock student repo, right? Now, now it won't be a null. Let's see. See, now it won't be null. It will be a mock object here. Okay. Okay. Stop it. Now here it's calling the database, right? But we don't want to call the database with a mock object. It won't be called a database. We want a mock object of student entity, right? So whenever it will be called this method, so I want a value called student entity object. Let's create a student entity object. Student entity mock mock new student entity, right? Okay, don't create this one first of all. Why? Because first of all, let's consider about the null case. Okay, or okay, so that what we'll do when, like we have learned, right? Do return when. Remember, you have to import this static method actually. Static import you have to do for when, or else Mockito dot when you can do. When student repo dot find by email and phone number. What is the input for this one? First name, email, phone number. All are string. Any string, comma, any string, comma, any string. Any string nothing but mock string only. Then return. I wanted to return a null object so that it will be here. If you see, this return will be null, so this condition won't be execute, then it will go ahead and save it here, right? Now let's do this one. Let's remove this one. Okay, let's function f9. It's came here, so student exist. If you see, it is written null object, so the data is not present in the database. It consider as like okay. Now when calling save method, return another student entity object, right? Student entity object, it will be written whenever obviously we have to store, so the save method will be written the entity object. So but we don't want to call the save method, we want to mock the save method. Now let's mock it. When student repo dot save of, what type of object it is taking? Student entity. So any of student entity dot class, any of student entity class, then return student entity object, right? Student entity, new student entity, then student entity dot set id, for example sample id. Okay, now response is coming here. Now let's do check either this response is coming as null or not null. Assert dot assert not null response. Okay, now let's run as a debug. See, you see student response, what is it is written. You see our mock value, it is written sample id, right? Now let's execute this one. Test cases, if you see, it will pass. So this kind of constant values, don't hard code here because it may be used in multiple places. So let's declare in the class level equal to sample, right? So we can reuse this one. Okay, cool. Assert not null you can check, or response dot get id not equal to null, those things you can check. Different ways of assertion. Okay, now let, for example, now if I can run this one, run as test with coverage, right? Let's understand what is this coverage actually. Whenever you are running as a coverage, it will be so like, if you see this green color lines is fully covered, this yellow color lines always will be, it will be covered as a partial, and this color orange color is, it didn't covered actually, it didn't covered. This faded color, it didn't covered. If you see this line, this line is not covered. Okay, so now we write one case null not equal to, So we have to write an existing. So this one will cover, this partial case will be also cover. Now let's write for that one. Let's copy test register exist student, right? Now same value, right? Student of environment returns, so it will be return null, but now I want to return a student entity object, right? Control X, here I can paste it. Now return this student entity object whenever it is calling find by, right? Now if you see here, we can execute this line will be satisfied, now this line will be execute, right? But this won't be execute, so we can remove this one, right? It will throw an exception. Now let's run, right? It is failed. If you see student already present, but we didn't handle properly, correct? Let's handle this one now. Now there will be a concept is there like assert throws, right? What is returning? Resource assert throw. Okay, let's do this way. Assertion dot assert throws. Okay, assert throws, assert throws, assert throws of what is throwing? Resource exist exception. Resource exist exception dot class. Okay, click then what it where it will be called, there it will be called to register student detail will be pass, correct? Student detail will be pass. Let's close this bracket. Okay, now what it will be written? A resource existing exception, res result or response it will be. Now if you see it here, now let's do assert equals, right? What is the message? Assertion dot assert equals of response, correct? Expected. What is it is returning? Student details already present, right? Let's copy this value here, comma response dot get message. You get message, right? Now assert dot equals. Now let's run it. Now if you see the test case is successful, right? Now how will we get to know like this line is executed or not? Let's verify this, right? We have discussed about verify also. Let's verify this. Where we have a verify, okay? So where it is there? Student repo, right? Then it we want it won't be call anytime, right? Why? Because it will be stopped here only. I don't want to call here, so that I want to check. So there will be a method never, okay, dot save of any of student entity dot class. Okay, let's check it. Okay, if you see test. Now let's run this both test in the class level only. Run as a coverage also. If you see here, now it's this function is fully covered, right? This function is fully covered now, correct? Now, okay. Now there will be, let's go for next API, student controller. There is an API called details, student details. Okay. Here also, if you see student details function is there. If you see here, student details find by ID, if present, then return the data with a message success. If data is not present, then return student is not present. So there will be two cases, if and else. Two cases we have to write. Let's write for this one now. Same way at the test public void test student details, right? Now what is required? Input is student id, right? Then student service dot student details of sample value we can provide, right? What is the return type? Student response dto response, correct? Now if you see here, there will be a method called find by id. We have to mock this one now. How? Now let's, what is returning? Student entity, right? Student entity is present. Okay. Okay. Now I'm not going to set any data, only simple I can return a new object, right? Then student entity, let's create a student entity object. Student entity equal to new student entity, correct? Now when student repo dot find by id of any string, then return of what is it is returning? Optional of student entity. Let's return optional, sorry, optional of student entity, right? It will be written optional of student entity. Now if you see response is coming here, then assert assertion dot assert equals, we can do assert equals expected is success, as you see, success comma response dot get message, correct? So here message will become success. I'm not checking about the student entity object. Whatever values will be set, for example here I can set student entity dot set id as sample value. Okay, let's test it. Run. See, let's see the values actually. Run as debug. See, it came here success. What is the student response DTO? If you see the ID, student ID sample, we have a value here sample. That's why it is coming. Let's move it. Move. Okay. Now we can write another negative scenario. Data is not present. Test student details. State test details not present. Not present or not exist. Something like that. Okay. Optional of I think we can pass null. Optional, okay, optional of null, not optional of optional dot empty value. Let's remove this one, not required now. Okay, so what it will come? Student is not present. Let's copy here. Okay, let's check it. Debug. It will come here now. If you see, okay, student response DTO, student is null return, right? Message null. Now it will set and return. Okay, so like this way we can add it for student details. Now for, let's test it for this one, delete student also. There will be some other things we have to check here. Delete student. Okay, now let's copy this one at the rate test delete student. Okay, the same way here, delete by id, right? If it is present it will delete, or else it will throw an exception like that. Okay, for example we have to mock this one, right? We don't want to interact with the database, like delete by id. It won't if you remember, we have a do nothing is there. So for void methods, we can go ahead for do nothing. What do nothing when student repo dot delete by id any string, right? Then okay, delete student successfully deleted. Let's test it. See, it will pass, right? Okay. Now there will be another method is there. Update student. You guys can try for this one. I am leaving you to try this one. Here I am returning simple null only. There is not a problem. For this condition, you can try. Okay. Then I have another method actually to call the other microservice. Okay. For example, if you see here, there will be some other some APIs is there to return some mock data, dummy data actually. I want to, so that is nothing but another microservice it is there, right? I want to call that API. Okay, let's run this application. Where is it? Okay, let's run this application and test this API first. Okay, other microservices, details other microservices. Okay, other microservice API is there. Okay, let me call. So it is calling another microservice and getting the JSON response. If you see here, some details is there. It will be returning. So these microservices I don't have actually. If you see here I am calling REST template using this API. I am calling another microservices API and getting the data. So I don't have control under that, but I want to write the test cases for this one. Let's go ahead and write the test cases for this one. Okay. Now same way at the test void test other service other service API. Okay. Okay. Now, if you see here, REST template is auto-wire here. If you see here, REST template. Let's mock it first. What happened? Okay. At that mock private of REST template, REST template, REST template. Okay. Now mock this method, exchange method actually. Okay. Now, if you see what will we are going to do here, exchange method base URL, these things we have to do. Okay. When REST template, okay, REST template dot exchange method of what the things it is asking. If you see here, URL, HTTP method, HTTP entity, response type, right? These things. Okay. Exchange method of what here any string, correct? Any string, comma, then any object, any, then comma. Is null we can pass HTTP entity, we don't have. Then any of response type class, any type of class. Okay. Then return one response we need, right? One string type of, because it's returning, if you see, plain string text, so we can return as a string type data. Okay. Yeah, let's prepare something. Okay, let's copy from the postman only mock response. Okay, here, then return this mock response here. Okay. Why it is not taking? Because it will be return a response entity object. Okay, response entity of response entity dot okay of response entity okay. Okay, mock response, it will be written inside the body. Okay, fine. Now let's go ahead and call the method. What will be written here? It will return a string response equal to student service dot student details from other microservices, right? Then assertion dot assert not null of response, right? Now let's test it. Now let's see, we have covered this one also. Now let's test whole class. Okay. If you see, we have total 6 test cases, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you see here, we have covered this register student method, the details method, this one, other microservices also how we are calling delete student method, this convert entity as a simple method. Okay. Now this method is pending. You can try this one. So as part of this one, we have this much. Okay. Before I can close this one, I have something else here. The test other microservices. Let me debug and show you some more important things actually. If you see here, we have a student base URL, right? We are calling here student base URL start B1 limit, right? Let's debug it. If you see here, debug, but student base URL is null coming. How can we set up these values, these properties values, if somewhere it is mandatory required in the sum of business logic? So that time, what we will do, we have a concept called, like, we can learn here before each. Now, at the rate before each of setup method, public void setup of, we can write, we have a class provided reflection test utils dot set field of the target class, which student service it is there. So what will be the attribute name? What will the attribute name? Student base URL. Then what will be the value? For example, sample only. Value we can use it here. Like we can use some HTTP, some real value. Localhost colon 8081, something like that. Right? Then slash. From where we started here. Okay, slash. Okay, cool. Now let's go ahead and run as debug again. See the same now. So we have learned this reflection test utils also. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. If you didn't subscribe my channel, please subscribe it. Thank you.